Welcome to Chapter 1, the linguistic components of arguments. We are going to be looking at the first section, sentences, statements, and propositions. And there are three things we're going to be looking at. First, we want you to be able to distinguish statements from questions, exclamations, and other linguistic functions. Typically, you can identify questions and exclamations by their punctuation, so that's one way, but we really need you to be aware of the differences between each of these. A sentence, for example, is a string of words constructed in accordance with the grammatical rules of a language, which can be used for many purposes, like asserting, asking, or commanding. A statement is a sentence, but it's used to make a claim or to assert something that is true or false. And the words claims, assertion, they're often synonymous for statement. So what we're looking for is an understanding of what constitutes a sentence, which you should be familiar with as you've all taken English courses. We're going to be focusing in this course on statements, and this is a specific type of sentence, and it's a sentence that can be true or false. And finally, our third concept we're going to look at is what is it that a sentence expresses? This is its proposition. It's the meaning or interpretation of a sentence. So again, we want to be able to distinguish between these three things: a sentence, a statement, and a proposition. A sentence, you're already familiar with. A statement is a sentence that can be true or false, and the proposition is the meaning of the sentence, what the sentence expresses. So let's take a look at the different types of sentences. We have questions, commands, exclamations, statements. Example of some questions: what day is it? What is your name? Some commands: stop that, clean your room. And some exclamations. And again, you will see that the punctuation will help you in making these distinctions. On page 3 of your textbook, it says a statement is a sentence used to make a claim or to assert something that is true or false. The words claim and assertion are often used as synonyms for statement. And again, a statement can be true or false, whereas a question, a command, or an exclamation cannot be true or false. So this class focuses very heavily on statements. For example, today is Friday. Well, while recording this video, it's Wednesday, so that statement would be false. We are at Los Medanos College. Well, I don't know where you are, but I happen to be at my home, not on a college campus, so that statement would be false. We live in California. I'm assuming that most people watching this video or in my classes does live in California, so that statement would be true. This is Intro to Logic class. Maybe Intro to Logic class, in which case that statement is true, might be Critical Thinking and Advanced Composition, in which case that statement is false. What's important is that each of these statements can be true or false, so it qualifies it as a statement. All right, now I want you to tell me whether each of the following are statements, questions, commands, or exclamations. I have 10 fingers. So we'd say, is this true or false? It's true for me, so that makes it a statement. Today is Friday. As mentioned, for me this is false right now because it's Wednesday while I'm recording this video. So this is a statement. Why not? Clearly, that's indicated that's a question by the question mark, so we identify this as a question. Go fly a kite. The exclamation mark, again, the punctuation, indicates that this is either a command or an exclamation. You and whose army? Again, the punctuation, the question mark, indicates this is a question. Yes, I will go. If this is true, or even if it's false, the fact that it can be true or false indicates that this is a statement. I live in Toledo. Well, I don't. I live in Bakersfield. That statement's false. But the fact that it's false indicates that it's a statement. Can you go on Friday? That's a question. The question mark identifies that for us. All right, let's try a few more. I've never been to Paris. Statement. I hate you. I hate you. Now, depending on the context of this sentence, it could be in the first instance simply a statement. I do or don't hate you, indicating that that statement is capable of being true or false, making it a statement. Or it might be an exclamation. Children very often will say to a parent, I hate you, when in actuality, they don't hate the parent. They're perhaps just angry or tantruming or some other issue. Or someone may do something you dislike and you say, I hate you, but you're not expressing that you hate them. You're expressing some emotional state, in which sense the context reveals the proposition to indicate whether this would be a statement or perhaps an exclamation. Don't go in there. I would say this is a command. How many cups of coffee? Question. I had pizza for lunch. Statement. So I think you'll begin to see the distinction between statements, question, commands, exclamations. So we've distinguished statements from questions, exclamations, and other linguistic functions, and now we're going to move on to recognizing rhetorical questions and trying to understand the intended statements behind them. This rhetorical question issue can be a pitfall because you might just look at the punctuation, see the question mark, and say, oh, this is a question. So you want to be sensitive to this particular issue of rhetorical questions. Rhetorical questions don't require an answer and instead make a statement, or they serve some other function, but you'll need to be sensitive to this. For example, when someone says, do you want me to give you something to cry about? They are typically not asking a question. They're making a statement or even a veiled threat. They may be commanding you to stop crying, for example, but there is more to the question than simply the asking of a question. If someone were to say something insulting like, what are you, stupid or something? They're typically not asking you if you are stupid. They're making a statement. They're saying you are stupid. Or if they are making that statement, then it becomes a statement rather than a question. If I were to say to you, do you want to fail this class? You wouldn't take that as me asking that question. You might take it as me making a statement. It is necessary to do your homework and make an effort in this class. I suppose you could even reach for an interpretation that I'm threatening you nefariously behind a question, do you want to fail this class? And somehow expressing a threat of force or something. So it's important to evaluate the context and the proposition or meaning behind these things to evaluate whether a statement is being made. In the first one, perhaps saying, I want you to stop crying, or stop crying as a command. In the second, what, are you stupid or something? Probably making the statement, you are stupid. And finally, explaining in the last question that you need to do your work. So that is a look at rhetorical questions and the statements behind them. And now we're going to move on to being sensitive to ambiguous sentences that express more than one proposition. And remember, the proposition is the meaning of the sentence or what a sentence expresses. Again, what a sentence expresses, meaning or interpretation of the sentence. For example, let's begin very simply with simple words. When I say the word hot and ask what is the proposition, we need a little more context because there's multiple meanings. So if I give you a little bit of context, for example, a picture, then you can associate the meaning. Here we mean a higher than comfortable temperature. But if I offer this context, we no longer mean a higher than physically comfortable temperature. We mean something like spicy. And if we change the context once again, we might mean beautiful or even sexy. And moving on, there is another meaning for hot. Can you tell from this context what we might be meaning? Yeah, stolen. Stolen. So The proposition is the meaning, and the context is when, where, or why you would use this meaning. I've showed context in the previous slides through the use of a picture, but unless you're including pictures with your homework, you will need to describe the context. So you might think of it in a way as taking a photograph of a person using that phrase or statement, expressing that phrase or statement, and then describe the photograph. Context is to take a picture of someone expressing that statement or proposition and then describe it. It is when, where, or why you would use a certain meaning. In this presentation, photos are used to identify the context. So our proposition here is the temperature is very high. Context, perhaps standing next to a campfire. Here, the proposition is it is spicy and I'm eating chili. Here, the proposition might be they are attractive or good looking. Where might I be where I would say that? I might be at the movies. Now, of course, these are not the only contexts, but just example contexts. Here, it is stolen, and the context might be someone offering to sell you things out of the trunk of their car. Let's move on to a phrase. It's the rock. Again, can contain many meanings. Here, what does it mean? Well, a boulder or stone. Context might be discussing the landscape of your yard. Here, it's a large diamond. You're looking at a friend's engagement ring. So we have the proposition and the context. Here, it's the nickname of the actor who played the Scorpion King, Dwayne Johnson. Context, maybe you're discussing your favorite actor. Here, we have a picture of Alcatraz in San Francisco, also known as The Rock. And perhaps you are discussing what sites you'll visit in San Francisco. This we're stretching a little bit, but I think the point will still hold. He smacked her. In this instance, he refers to Snoopy, and what he is doing is kissing. Here, smacking means to slap or strike in an altercation or a fight. Here, it means heroin or drugs. And the reason why it's important to know which proposition or phrase or statement is making is so you can evaluate its truth or falsity. If someone were to say to you, I'm late, and you were asked to evaluate the truth or falsity of that, you would need to know the proposition and the context. So in this instance, here, the context indicates to us that it means I am not on time for an appointment, or I have failed to arrive on time or before an agreed upon meeting time. However, there are other propositions for this same statement. I'm late here does not refer to appointments and times. It refers to the fact that I'm late with the onset of menses, a typical indication that one is pregnant. All right, and how about this statement? I'll meet you on the other side. We need to evaluate this for truth or falsity. We need to know the context. So in this instance, if I'll say, I'll meet you on the other side, and we're out hiking, and you're going to go across the bridge, and I'm going to go down under the bridge and across the gully. But we see a completely different meaning in this instance. Here, it's perhaps two loved ones discussing that they will see each other after death, perhaps on the other side of the pearly gates, for example. So we're going to be working with statements, and they want you to provide two separate propositions and contexts. So what is a proposition expressed by the words I do? Well, this is, for example, done in wedding ceremonies where you are stating, I will take this woman to be my wife. So our proposition, what does the statement I do mean? Here it means I will take this woman to be my wife. Where or when might you say this? Well, in a marriage ceremony. But a completely different proposition would be expressed in a different context. So you might say I do and mean by that, I swear to uphold the U.S. Constitution. Where would you say I do and mean that? Well, perhaps during the oath made by a president at the inauguration. So we have two different propositions expressed, indicated by the separate contexts. Here, shut your mouth, Tom. This sentence can have more than one proposition, as can many sentences. We might see it as a command or request to be quiet. You might be in a movie theater. But what we're looking for this assignment is explicitly different propositions. So what is another possible meaning of shut your mouth that doesn't have to do with being quiet or talking? Well, how about at the dentist's office? The dentist might say, shut your mouth, Tom, and literally mean to physically close his mouth for a dental imprint or a mold of some sort in any place, in any act where he's trying to take an impression of your teeth. All right, and here we have the defense never rests. And we need two propositions and two contexts. And you want to try not to use the words in your propositions. So you don't say one proposition expressed by it is hot is that it is hot. You need different words. So what do we mean by the defense? Well, one instance could be a legal defense. So we want to say his legal defense never gives up. His legal team never gives up, avoiding the words defense and rests. And what would be the context where the defense or his legal team will not give up? How about in the O.J. Simpson trial, for example? But then we need a second proposition in context with a completely different meaning. And another meaning of defense is perhaps on a sports team, like a football team, where the defense parties so hard that they don't sleep. And so you would say the defense never rests, meaning the players on the team that are not the offense or special units like to party and stay up all night. So this is going to be the way your homework works. You have to come up with two contexts and two propositions. So let's look at the last example. Jim's car was hot. One proposition expressed by this might be that your friend Jim's automobile is really fast. Where and when would you say Jim's car was hot and have that proposition? Well, perhaps you're out on the street watching a street race and Jim wins and you turn to someone and say, Jim's car was hot. Now we need a second and completely different proposition expressed. Well, how about Jim's automobile was stolen? You find out that your next door neighbor Jim was driving a stolen car and you turn perhaps to the person standing next to you and say, Jim's car was hot. So I think you get the idea of how this works. Feel free to reach out and if you need any help with this, and best of luck. And I will remind you the content does challenge us and we're going to face that challenge and succeed. Best of luck. Talk to you later.